Hello, my name is Susan, and you're watching Wired Lotus's tutorials. I'm so glad to have you here. We are going to today work on the herringbone lesson for creating a wire ring, such as this one here that I've done in copper. We're going to be doing one in sterling silver and fine silver as well. The tools that we're going to need are chain nose pliers. We're going to need flush cutters, a ruler, a permanent marker, and this is optional, but it's something that I highly recommend when creating just a simple coil that you can put on wire, and that is music wire, or also called piano wire. What I'm using is I'm going to be using 0.025 music wire. You're going to need some beads, 8mm bead. This bead is going to need to have a hole big enough to accept the 20 gauge wire, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. That hole needs to fit on a 20 gauge wire. You don't want it too big so that there's too much room for it to wobble around in, but you want it just big enough so it'll fit on that 20 gauge wire. You're also going to need size 8/0 seed beads. I chose kind of some periwinkles and purples in order to do that. And you're going to need about 12 to 15 beads in order to create this ring. You're also going to need a ring mandrel and some wire. The wire you're going to need is this right here is 30 centimeters of 20 gauge wire, and we're going to mark that at the halfway point with the permanent marker. That's the reason for the permanent marker. We're going to need two lengths, 25 centimeters of 24 gauge wire. So that would be 50 centimeters total of the 24 gauge. We're also going to need 40 centimeters of 22 gauge wire. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's take a look at what we're going to be doing here today on our ring. We're going to start off by coiling a couple of coils onto our 20 gauge wire with 22 gauge wire. Once we put those coils on, then we're going to insert our bead. And then when our bead is on there, we're going to bring that long 22 gauge wire around the bead. We're going to add our smaller beads, our ancillary beads there, and then we're going to coil a couple of times around to the other side. And then we're going to bring the wire to the other side, the opposite side, adding our beads, coil a couple more times. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into herringbone mode. We're going to bring our wire on top, around, under, on top, and then over to the other side, on top, under, and on top. We're going to do that a total of 3 times. Once we've done that 3 times with our herringbone, we're going to be doing another herringbone weave, but this herringbone weave is going to have some coils, and that's what we are going to end with. Finally, we're going to be making the ring shank using our ring mandrel. So that's what we're going to be doing here today. Here I have my 20 gauge wire, and I have my 40 centimeters of 22 gauge wire. I'm going to create a little bit of a tail here, and then I'm going to coil a couple of times around the 20 gauge wire. The reason why I make that tail is so that I can grip that wire just a little easier. So we're going to go ahead and do a couple of coils. So there we have our coils, and I'm just going to pinch those together a little bit. And I'm going to unravel that little extra I have here. So what I have looks like this so far. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add our bead. We're going to add that bead to the opposite side here on the 20 gauge wire. There we go. We're going to put that there. Now what we're going to do is flip our wire so that it remains on top here next to the bead over here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be adding onto that wire some of our seed beads. With the ring that I did earlier, I added a total of 6 beads. So let's see if I add 6, what this looks like as I bring it across. I'm not really, being overly strategic about which beads I'm going to add, because I just kind of like to give that variety look. So there we have about 6 beads on there. I'm going to let those beads go ahead and slip down. And now what I'm going to do, again, I want to make sure that my wire is right here to the left of that mark. Okay, so I'm going to put that bead on there, and I'm going to bring this wire up and around and over to the other side. I want those beads just to get to the point where if my wire reaches there, just that they create this beautiful little arc. I maybe could even add another bead. Yeah, why don't I add another bead? That way it'll look more full. Okay, and then we're going to put that on there. Now, let's take a look and see where we're at. Perfect. Now, that one has 7 beads. My other one had 6 beads. So you might want to just kind of fiddle with it to see how many beads you need. So here, my wire is resting on the top. I'm going to bring that wire around in a coil. Again, starting from the top, going down and around and over. So I've just created one single coil. And now we're ready to cut that little wire end that we had before. I'm trying to make sure we don't cut the 20 gauge wire here, okay? So there we go. Now we can cut that. And also, now we can add 7 more beads and see how those will fit around the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I like that periwinkle color. It's pretty. Let's try 7 on the other side. Now, sometimes I find that if I just add 7 on one side, sometimes the other side takes 8, or it might take fewer. It might take only 6, but let's just take a look. Now, if you notice here, let me kind of zoom in here a little bit. We have a little bit of a gap. I want to just kind of compress that and bring that in so that gap isn't so far away from that bead. Now, let's bring it around to the other side and just see what we have here. Do we have enough beads in order to create that kind of that circle look all the way around? I would say we're probably pretty good there. I mean, I always do a lot of finessing with my wire. So I'm going to place that wire on top of the 20 gauge wire. Now, if you notice over here, I have my mark, and I want to make sure that I'm pushing this back to that mark because that's the halfway center. That's where I want to be. So my wire rests on top. I'm going to go down and around into a coil. All right, there we go. We've got our coil. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a traditional herringbone from here. And the way that that works is that means we're going to be, and I'm going to tilt this bead a little bit so you can kind of see what this looks like. I'm going to bring my wire underneath those beads over to the other side and then on top. We're always going to rest our wire, our weaving wire, on top. And then we're going to create another coil. And then the same on the other side. Again, I'm going to just tilt that so you can see what I'm doing on the other side. I'm just bringing those underneath those beads. We're coming back to the front. We're resting that wire on top. We're going on top and around in another coil. All right, let's do that again with the herringbone. This time we're going to go underneath that last weave that we just did. So I'm bringing my wire underneath that piece of wire that I did before, that last row. And then I'm going to show you the top again, and we're going from on top, around, and over. Okay, we're creating that herringbone weave. We're going to do 3 rows of traditional herringbone. Let's go ahead, flip it over so I can show you on the back side what we're doing again. We're just bringing this wire, and I'm kind of compressing that wire so that it just aligns underneath this wire. Make sure it's underneath, and then we're bringing that wire on top again, and we're going to create another coil. So if you notice, these coils are always happening on the outside of the last coil. There's a sequence that comes along with this that we want to make sure that we maintain. So we're going to just bring, this is our 3rd and final traditional herring weave. We're bringing that underneath that last one and on top and around and over. And we have one more traditional weave to do on this side. So we're bringing that, again, I'm going to show you that here. This is what it looks like on the back side. Looking kind of cool here. And we're going on top, around, and over. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to right now just kind of set this aside for a minute, because what we're going to do next is we're going to create a coil. With this coil, we're going to be using our fine 24 gauge wire, and this is 25 centimeters. You're going to need 2 lengths of that. So what I have here, this is 24 gauge, 25 centimeters, and I'm creating a mandrel using that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a little bit of a tail here, and I'm going to coil. I'm going to coil about 5 coils, and then I'm going to pinch it in. Let's zoom up on this so you can see this a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to coil 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to pinch it in. Now, the nice thing about being on this mandrel is I can just slide it down. I noticed that when I coil here on the end, it just is a little bit easier. So let's coil again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I find that a round inch is about what you're going to need in order to make this work. So let's take a look and let's see how close we are. Oop, we're not close at all. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create a coil so that it will wrap all the way around to the other side, much like we did with our beads. Let's keep going. Okay, so here we have about 1 inch of coiling that we've done there on the wire. This wire gets a few burrs on it, so what I like to do is just take some sandpaper and just sandpaper the end so that this coil, when it comes ready to come off, it just slides right off. So there we have it. And here's our coil. Ta-da! I can just take this coil and I can slide it onto the wire. So here we have it. And I noticed when I took that off of the wire, I did not cut my ends on the wire, because that wire is, because it's steel, it can damage your cutters. So you want to make sure you pull it off and then you cut your ends. So now our ends are cut, and we can go ahead and we can put this here on our, here we go. Okay, here we go. So now we have our coil right there. And that's what we're looking to do, is we're looking to create this kind of this coil that goes to the other side. I think this one's going to just be perfect, just like it is. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So now what we're going to do, now that we have our coil on and we have swung it over to the other side, we're going to do another herringbone, just like we did before. On top, around, and on top again. Okay, I'm going to smooth out that wire, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to create another coil and put it here on our wire. Now that our second coil is done, very quickly if I might add, if it were only that fast, if it were, we're going to go ahead and we're going to insert that there onto the wire, and we're going to bring that around to the other side, just like we did before. Now, this is one of those maneuvers that you're just going to need to just kind of tuck it underneath those beads a little bit, because we want to make sure that that's going to hold into place and be a little bit supported, because if it's against the beads, it is going to be supportive. Just taking a look. Okay, I think I can live with that. So we've got the wire on top, and we're going to go up and around and over, and I'm going to create one more extra loop, and that's going to hold that in securely, because what we have is we have our main focal point here. So I have this little extra wire here that's left over, and I'm going to bring my wire cutters in, and I'm going to cut that. I'm going to just double check and make sure that it's nice and cut. It is, it's nice and cut. So now we're ready to begin the ring portion of this video. So our ring portion here is a little bit flat, and since we're making a ring, we just want to kind of bend that down a little bit so that it kind of creates that arc that we're looking for with our ring. We can also do that a little bit here on the ring mandrel. So we're just taking it, we're compressing everything. Notice I'm not just compressing the edges, I'm compressing the entire piece right up against this. And I'm sorry my finger's in the way, but I'm going to need to do that in order to compress the entire piece to create kind of that arc. So now what you have is you have kind of this like arced modified herringbone weave. Let's go ahead and create our wire. We're going to start off by bringing our entire piece over here to the size 8. Now keep in mind, because we are going to be doing a few wraps on the inside, if I'm at a size 8, it'll probably be more of a 7.5 when all is said and done. So if you're looking for a size 8 or a size 7, why don't you just go up a size, half size to make sure that it's going to fit. So we're going to put this at the 8. We're going to bring our wire ends up and over and around, and this side around to the other side. Now what I have is I have something that looks like this. Now what are we going to do next? I'm going to show you what we're going to do. Take a look here. I have one wire that wants to cross over. We don't want this wire to cross over. We want that to be on the other side. And what we're going to do is we're going to continue to bring that wire up and over to the other side so that it's parallel to the ring shank. That's what we're making here, is the ring shank. We're going to do the same with this side, bringing it up and over and in between here, so that what we have now looks like this. Now, what we can do at this point, we need to make sure that we're holding it nice and steady and firm. This wire, since it's sterling silver, is just a little bit on the springy side, so I'm going to be very careful about bringing that off the ring mandrel. And then I'm going to create a coil here. I'm going to bring that down, over, and around. And I'm going to just create one coil. And there's a reason why I'm only creating one coil for now. Just need to just lock in that shape right now. I'm going to put it back on the ring mandrel. Let's see how close I am to that 8. Still looks pretty good. So I'm going to take it off. And with that other side, I'm going to show you what that looks like. Just kind of looks like that. We're going to bring our wire and we're going to bring it down over to the other side of that ring shank. We're going to create another coil now. I just bend my wire here a little bit so that it tucks in, and I'm going to bring this down, over, and I'm going to just jimmy it a little bit, or I call it shimmy it, jimmy it. I'm wiggling it so that it goes on top. And that I'm going to bring in my pliers and just kind of compress that a little bit. Now we have one coil on this side and we have one coil on that side, and this is what it looks like on the inside. Let's go ahead and bring it back on the mandrel, see where we're at. We're just a little less than 8 at this point now. So let's say I was a 7.5. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create another coil. Besides, having 2 coils will really help to secure this. Your goal is to have a minimum of 2 coils on either side. So we have our one, so now we're going to bring our other one in, and we're creating another coil. If for some reason you're finding the wires being a little tricky, you can just bring it in and wiggle it and pull as you wiggle it. So now I have 2 coils, and I want to compress that right up against there. Still a little bit bumpy there, so I'm just going to compress that a little bit. Now we're going to do the same on the other side. Okay, we're going to bring that wire. We're just going to just kind of make a U out of it there, and just like that. And we're going to bring it through, up, before I actually make that coil, I want to make sure that the first coil is as compressed, as close as possible to that bead, and I'm going to create another coil. And you want those coils to line up side by side here. I'm going to be bringing this in again, and I'm going to use my pliers here this time just to kind of pull it through. Okay, I'm going to push this, compress that right up against there, and push it in. Okay, now let's try it on for size. Now, there, this is starting to look like it's going to fit more towards our 7.5. I'm going to just kind of work that wire a little bit around, making sure that it's a little bit more round. If I want to, I can create coils on either side to make it smaller. If I want to make this larger, what I want to do is compress it up against my ring mandrel even further. Nice thing about that is it's going to be even more round the more you compress further. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull it out, and let's go ahead and create some more, one more coil. So I've got one more coil. So now I have 3 coils on either side of the ring. Okay, there's 3 coils on this side. Let's go to the other side. Let's create another 3rd coil on the other side. And we're going to come in. Now when I cut my wires, I like to make sure that I cut so that the cut is on the outside, because if the cut is on the inside, it's not going to be as sightly. However, we run into the problem of those little cut wires maybe just kind of hurting or being a little uncomfortable. So what I like to do is I like to cut my wire so that it's just on the outside. Okay, so there's that one. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut this wire just on the outside as well. So now that we have 3, let's go ahead and slide it on, see where we're at. Now see, that 3rd and final coil, it made this so much more smaller. So if I turn it on, you can see we're almost at a 7. But remember, we can push it down this way so that it's a little bigger. Our goal was 7.5, and it looks like we're pretty close to that. So let's go ahead and take that off and take a look at our lovely little ring that we have here. Gorgeous, 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 beautiful. And see the inside of it? This is what it looks like on the opposite side. So there we have it. Thank you so much for joining me here. I hope that if you found value to this video, or you create this ring and you've enjoyed the process, I'd love for you to hear from you in the comments. The more that you comment, the more feedback I get, and the more that I can know what to do and what to perform as far as videos here in the future. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so glad to have you here.